The EFF, the Electronic Frontier Foundation, is filing a lawsuit against DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, and Elon Musk in order to stop them, to stop DOGE from doing an audit of government spending, which raises the question, why? Why is the EFF trying to stop an audit of wasteful government taxpayer spending? Why is that happening? Could it be that the EFF is benefiting financially from government abused spending? It kind of looks that way. We dig into it a little bit here. This all comes after all the hoopla around USAID and all of the investigations that the DOGE team and Elon Musk are doing relating to the extraordinarily wasteful government spending that's been going on, which, interestingly, until right now, has always kind of been something that all Americans could get together on. Like, oh, yeah, clearly the government shouldn't be spending $30,000 on a hammer. There were so many movies that made fun of the fact that we spend $30,000 on a hammer or a toilet seat. And there was clearly wasteful spending going on because that's our money. Until now. Because Trump and Elon Musk are trying to audit the US government. Now, all of a sudden, there's organizations that are vehemently against it, like the EFF. Now, the EFF is not necessarily, or shouldn't have been, a political organization. The whole point of the Electronic Frontier Foundation originally was to help people in positions of power, judges, sheriffs, police officers, senators, everybody in a position of law enforcement power to understand how computers work, to understand how computer networks work, what source code was, how encryption worked, that sort of thing. So when they made laws, when they enforced laws that related to computers, they could do so with a certain amount of knowledge, right? That was the whole purpose of it. Well, now the EFF has just essentially become a partisan political organization. Quote, the EFF sues DOGE, this is from their own blog, and the Office of Personnel Management to halt ransacking of federal data. EFF and a coalition of privacy defenders have filed a lawsuit today asking a federal court to block Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, from accessing the private information of millions of Americans that is stored by the Office of Personnel Management, and to delete any data that has been collected or removed from databases so far. The lawsuit also names the Office of Personnel Management and asks the court to block that office, OPM, from sharing further data with DOGE. So basically what they're saying is, any investigation you've done so far, you have to delete it all. That's what they're going for here. Did you find out some information? Well, you can't find out anymore, and you can't look anymore, and whatever you found out, you have to delete and forget. That's what the EFF is suing for. Quote from their announcement, this brazen ransacking of Americans' sensitive data is unheard of in scale. When they talk about Americans' data, what they're talking about is they're looking through employment records of the federal government agencies, right? And these aren't elected officials. These are people who got a job at the federal government, and they're going through line by line all of the people who worked at the federal government, how much they got paid, what they did, trying to determine whether or not it's useful to keep them. Now, if you can't do such an audit, you can't really run any organization. It'd be impossible to do an audit without looking at that data. So what the EFF is basically saying in this lawsuit is it should be blocked by the courts if anyone tries to do the audit. It's absolutely ridiculous. Here's a screenshot for those of you watching the video version. United States District Court, Southern District of New York. Interesting location choice on that one. They specifically went for a district in New York that is more likely to have judges that will want to rule against Trump and Musk, etc., just on principle, just because, regardless of the law. This is from the EFF and a consortium of organizations, including the AFL-CIO, against the United States Office of Personnel Management, Elon Musk, DOGE, and all that sort of thing. So that brought up the question, is the EFF trying to hide something here, right? Are they coming to the defense of people who have something to hide, right? One or the other. Is that happening? And I asked the EFF, I sent him an email. I asked the question over on X. I got a hold of them every which way I could think of, and I've heard absolutely nothing. So because the EFF has chosen to remain non-transparent, silent, and secretive on this matter, I took matters into my own hands, and I pulled up their tax records for the last several years and started going through things. Now, the EFF brings in a good chunk of change, right? $17 million, almost $18 million in 2023. In 2022, they brought in about $24 million. They're not $1 billion agency, but they bring in tens of millions of dollars every year. And the vast majority of that comes in what's flagged as contributions. Now, contributions can mean a lot of things. And if you really sit down and try and drill into it further, here, let me bring this up here. And break it down, it becomes a little bit challenging because the EFF, for all their bluster about transparency, is not a very transparent organization. They do not outline exactly where certain funds come from. They break things down insofar as they are forced to by law because of the type of organization they are. And one thing that's worth noting is that the lion's share of revenue that they received comes from individual contributions, meaning one-time contributions. When you say individual contributions, in this case, that does not mean your Aunt Frances in Nebraska. She's an individual. No. What we're talking about here is one-off contributions of over $50,000. Now, they don't say of over $100,000, $200,000, etc. They just say anything over $50,000 goes into this one basket. And that accounts for the 2023 year, which is the most recent year they have filed their records on, over $6 million of their revenue. They also have foundation grants in the amount of $1.5 million. So, I mean, the majority, the lion's share, the largest singular chunk is in mega donations, right? Mega contributions, mega payments. And they use that funds heavily towards lobbying purposes, right? So the EFF then goes, I mean, most of their money gets paid in just salaries for the people that work there, because the people that work there make a good amount of money. They make $300,000 or so per year, a lot of them, and they make a good solid income. But they also put a lot of money towards lobbying efforts, right? Lobbying government institutions to provide funding for other organizations. That's a lot of what the EFF actually spends their money on. Money that comes to them largely in huge, over $50,000 checks, blop, one at a time. So I went over to the Data Republican. Republican is the small r in this case. And this is a great little website in that it allows you to track where the fund flow happens. Now, tracking exactly where money comes from is incredibly difficult. The systems tend to be extraordinarily complicated on purpose by design. So if you wanted to say, okay, nonprofit foundation for Happy Dappy Footwear, the Happy Dappy Footwear organization gets $1 million. Okay, where does that $1 million come from? Well, knowing exactly is kind of hard because it comes from 7 different organizations primarily, and some of those don't receive any taxpayer money at all. So you'd be like, well, see, no taxpayer money goes to Happy Dappy Footwear. But then you look at it and you find out that most of those non-taxpayer funded organizations that are funding Happy Dappy Footwear, they receive a huge amount of money from organizations that are tax funded. So you see, it goes through multiple hops until the funding gets to the final destination. It makes it very difficult to track where exactly the funds came from for each dollar. So, but Data Republican does a nice job of at least connecting some of the dots. It's a good starting point. So here, what you see before you, if you're watching the video version, is an extraordinarily messy chart of what all the various major donation routes are for the Electronic Frontier Foundation. The Electronic Frontier Foundation is a little gray rectangle in the top left corner. It's second from the top left. And all the little red rectangles you see, the dozen or so red rectangles, those are all organizations that receive huge amounts of taxpayer money, such as from USAID. And those are organizations that have received over $10 million from federal grant programs like USAID. And then the little yellow ones are kind of in the middle, and the gray ones lesser, right? But this shows where the funds flowed and generally how much. And as you start walking through it, you start noticing some curious things. For example, a significant amount of the money that goes into the Electronic Frontier Foundation comes from Impact Asset Incorporated. Now, Impact Asset Incorporated receives no taxpayer funding, none at all. However, a huge number of organizations fund Impact Asset Incorporated to the tune of over $1 billion worth. And one of those organizations that seems to be funneling its funds towards the EFF is the Aspen Institute. Now, the Aspen Institute is a distinctly partisan organization. Just in the last year, the Aspen Institute gave over $120,000 specifically to only Democrat causes within the United States, including the Kamala Harris campaign. It's a very, very partisan organization. Now, I'm not faulting them for being partisan, but it's important to note what they are. And the Aspen Institute does receive taxpayer funds, such as from USAID and other grant sources, for multiple millions of dollars. And that's not the only one. We've also got World Resource Institute and Pact Incorporated that, if you follow the chain, they all provide a tremendous amount of funds that seem to flow into the EFF, which is worth noting. And both of those organizations receive huge amounts of taxpayer money. Pact Incorporated receives over $140 million in taxpayer funding, and it looks like at least some of that flows into the EFF. Now, exactly how much? It's extraordinarily difficult to know because, first off, the EFF is very non-transparent about where these funds come from. They try to hide it, it seems like. But if you start digging into it, for example, let me zoom in here so I can see all this. The EFF, some of their funds, right, because they receive, they're tens of millions every year. Some of those funds come through Fidelity Investment Charitable Gift Fund. Now, that Fidelity Fund handles $250 million. Some of those funds come through World Vision Incorporated, which receives like $500 million, something like that, in some crazy amount in taxpayer money, such as through USAID. So it goes from World Vision Incorporated to Fidelity Investments, and then from Fidelity Investment, it goes to a variety of sources. One of those sources being the Electronic Frontier Foundation. So, which brings us to the general point. Is the EFF suing to stop the audit of any federal spending like this because they benefit from it? And I think the answer is, yeah, it sure looks like it. They even went over on X, breaking, we are suing DOGE and the Office of Personnel Management to stop the brazen and illegal data sharing of federal employees' data with the Government Efficiency Group. Got to attack them. It's fascinating. But so what have we learned here? Realistically, from all of this data that we pull together, what do we know? Well, does the EFF receive taxpayer money? And the answer is, we don't know. We really don't. It looks like it. It looks highly likely that they receive a tremendous amount of taxpayer money. But because of their lack of transparency And they're trying to sue to stop further investigation into the topic. They're literally fighting tooth and nail to keep people from investigating this. I'd say it's almost a certainty. But again, we got to come at this from a logical engineering journalist point of view here. Can we prove, based on the data we have right now, that the EFF knowingly takes or benefits from taxpayer money? And the answer is we cannot prove that without a shadow of a doubt at this point. If I had to put a percentage on it, I'd say it's 95% or better that, yeah, it sure looks like it. But we can't prove it at this point. It just looks real likely. And their actions suggest that they know that. The second thing is, the second question I have here is, do organizations who fund the EFF receive taxpayer money, right? So because there's two real ways that the EFF benefits. One is the money gets funneled through organizations from the US government through organizations and then into the EFF. The second is that the US government funds organizations. Those organizations fund the EFF, but not with the government money, right? So if an organization is funding the EFF, such as, for example, the Austin Community Fund, right? The Austin Community Fund sends a significant amount of money to the Electronic Frontier Foundation, and they directly receive those tax monies from the federal government. Well, clearly they want to keep those tax funds coming in, right? Are any of these organizations putting pressure on the EFF, either directly or indirectly, in order to stop them from being investigated? Because if these organizations that are funding the EFF get shut down for whatever reason, that funding dries up, whether or not the taxpayer funding was going directly to the EFF. See what I'm saying here? So do those organizations who fund the EFF receive taxpayer money? Yes, for sure. Without a doubt, we can follow that money trail definitely to that point. That there is zero question about it, several agencies. And is the EFF fighting to stop the audit of where the taxpayer money goes? Well, yeah. With everything they've got, they're coming at them, man. They're waging a publicity campaign. They're fighting in the courts. Where's that screenshot of the there it is. There's the legal filing. They're filing a lawsuit. They're doing everything they can to stop Elon Musk, to stop President Trump, to stop the Department of Government Efficiency, to stop the Office of Personnel Management, to stop anyone from looking at the books. They desperately don't want anyone looking at the books, and they're hiding behind some sort of a vague. But if they look at the books, people will know someone's name. Someone's name will be known if they look. Well, yeah, that's how that happens. If you're a company and you can't look at the books because there might be a name in there, well, then you can never fully file your books. You can't even file your taxes. It's ridiculous. The argument the EFF is making is absolutely insane, asinine, and ridiculous. And it's sketchy as all hell. I'm going to keep looking into this. If the EFF ever responds, which they won't. Come on. I will, of course, let everyone know, and I'm going to keep digging because I want more details on this. I absolutely want more details. And in case you're wondering, no. The EFF is not the only organization that is benefiting from United States taxpayer funds, including those coming through USAID. The Lunduke Journal's on top of that. Thank you to everyone who subscribes to the Lunduke Journal. Go to lunduke.com, click on all the links. Lots of ways to listen, to watch, to subscribe. It's wonderful. You'll like it very much. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, nerds and nerdettes across the inner tubes, I do declare, end broadcast.